Welcome to the Codecast podcast. Real-world insights for your daily medical coding and billing processes. And now, here's your host, Terry Fletcher.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Codecast podcast. Today, my name is Terry Fletcher. Hope everyone's having a good start to your spring and that you're getting some work done. So I wanted to talk today about an article I came across, and again, thank you to my good friend Stephanie Allard, who's been putting out a bunch of articles. I know I need to write some for my own site, but I had some insight into this, and I actually was reading her article, and I also wanted to add my 2 cents, obviously, to a topic called Additional Documentation Request Process, or what we use the acronym ADR for. So just so you know what that is, an ADR is a request from CMS, so Medicare, or another payer for additional documentation that's required for a review of a healthcare or billing claim. And that can take place before or after the claim is adjudicated or processed. So you have prepayment reviews, you have post-payment reviews, and then you get these pesky little ADRs. And it's really important to understand what an ADR is and how to make sure that your workflow implements a policy in your practice so that you do not miss the information that's required to be sent by very specific deadlines and for very specific purposes. But I noticed as I was reading the article and as I was creating another article myself on some things, and also I am a legal TV junkie, so I love the old Law and Orders. I watch Numbers. I know I've mentioned that on my podcast. I love that. I actually am rewatching it now. I love, The West Wing. Even though I'm a conservative, I actually thought that was done pretty well. But I noticed that in a lot of the dramas that I look at, a lot of the different TV shows, I notice, and the reason I bring this up in this topic is that we're always told, especially, that nice little show called Suits, to only answer the question you're asked. So if somebody asks you a question, yes or no, full stop. Don't give additional information. Well, we get that in our head sometimes when we are entertained by media or a book or something that we're looking at. But then in the real world, and again, coming back to my topic of ADR, additional documentation requests, you have to understand what the payer is actually asking you for. What are they looking at and what triggered the request? So one important part of this is you really have to have a process in place to review all of the incoming mail timely and by someone who actually knows the types of requests that need to be looked at and what needs to be handled immediately and maybe what can be put in the basket for later. One thing all of us know who are in the coding, billing, and revenue cycle management office is that time flies. You can think you put something in your basket to look at next week, and all of a sudden you look at the calendar and it's been a month and you're like, oh shoot. So looking at that specific situation as far as your workflow and making sure that you include that step of having a process in place, because we still get incoming mail, and a lot of these ADRs come from snail mail. And so, a breakdown of this vital step often leads to missing a required timeline, and that can result in your claims being denied, or you've got an expired deadline where you didn't meet the communication deadline. And then, that's a problem. And all communications from Medicare, CMS, and the various different payers have to be tracked. So when you participate with these payers, you have to make sure that you're billing directly. Make sure you're tracking also any communication that you're receiving. Once you receive the communication by whoever that point person is, it should go to a compliance, coding, or revenue cycle management staff member that can take action on that request right away and put a deadline on it and I would also have the person's facilitating this that puts it in a log and then follows up to see where that is. This is such an important step and process that I think before we even get into what you're supposed to send, you have to make sure that you've got that process in place. And that's missed a lot of times when I do audits for practices. I say, okay, well, where did you get an ADR? Usually it's a pink form. I go, did anybody see that? And they're like, let me see who I need to talk to. And usually they can't find the person or don't know, who gets the mail on that or who delivers it and really what the workflow that is there. Now, when you're reviewing an ADR, you need to be aware of what they're looking for and the contractor, department, or division that is asking for the documentation. This is a really big key because this will help you determine whether the review is a routine one, like with risk adjustment review, they just look at diagnosis only, or CERT, where they're basically just looking at something from an algorithm that they have. Or is there a potential issue that's being looked into for fraud, waste, and abuse that you were targeted for by something that was found? So if that's the case, if it comes from CMS, that would be from organizations like UPIC, that's the Unified Program Integrity Contractor, or ZPIC, Zone Program Integrity Contractor. I was told that was going away in exchange for UPIC, but I'm still seeing them out there. Also, don't forget those pesky RACs. Those are the Recovery Audit Contractors, and they're paid on a percentage of what they collect. For commercial payers, they're called SIUs. I always forget the first letter of that acronym for SIU. It's Special Investigative Units. And so don't forget what that is. And they would be the department requesting the records. And always look to see the signature line and which department it is. Sometimes I'll see people just sending it to where they send the claim, and no, it won't get there. So when you receive a review like that, there's an opinion, and I know Stephanie has this opinion of, maybe getting a healthcare law attorney or a compliance expert, hiring somebody externally. I'm going to give a different tact on that. I think you need to have a point person that's working within your practice first level. So when you receive a review like that, you need somebody that has experience. Even if you think your claims are accurate, there is a reason that the services are being reviewed, and you do not want to wait until later in the process to bring in an attorney and experts that could have made an impact earlier on in the process. And I know everyone always goes right to the healthcare attorney, but that's expensive. They are very familiar, or can be familiar, with the various types of audits and steps that need to be taken. But to me, before you outlay that kind of money, let's see what you can do internally. And make sure you understand your rights under the ADR and what you need to gather. So first, when you receive an ADR, you have the following rights that will be identified in the communication from the payer based on the step you are in during the process. So you can request an explanation regarding the ADR or documentation that needs to be sent, but that means you have to ask right away so that you're still meeting the deadlines they have in the request or the letter. You can request an extension on the due date, but that doesn't have to be granted, and the payer is one who decides the new due date if approved. So let's say you have a provider that's out for an emergency, or on leave from being sick, or you're short-staffed for some reason, and so you can't gather the information. Those could be excuses or reasons that they may give you or grant you an extension on the due date. But please don't use that, obvious, I should say, don't fabricate that, because you only want to ask for an extension if you really need it. You really want to make sure that you're taking care of this. And you always have a right to appeal any findings later, and we'll talk about that. But when responding to the ADR letter, it's also important that you know exactly what's being asked for and the services that are going to be part of what they're reviewing or the audit, because they are auditing you. When you get these inquiries, they're basically saying, we want to take a look at what you're doing to find out, can you support what you sent us for reimbursement? Now, this is where I go back to my Law and Order, my legal shows that I watch. Again, a lot of times we're like, what did they ask you for? Only send them specifically what they asked. But when you're looking at ADRs, you may think it's straightforward, as you would just pull the corresponding records for the date of service, but that's not always the case. When audits are being conducted, remember that the documentation will be reviewed to determine whether the claim information for that date of service is appropriate. But the review also includes the process of validating medical necessity. So it's not just, did you meet the criteria for that level of service or for that particular service, you probably did because you have documentation that shows that. But did you meet the medical necessity? So should it have even been done in the first place? Now, this happens a lot of times with lab services. So, for example, when labs are audited, the results and the initial order requisition that are completed is not all that's needed, just the doctor ordering it and then the results. That's not all that the payers are looking for. They're also looking for notes from the recent patient encounters, the office visit or a hospital visit or whatever it was, and when the tests were ordered, and also when were they sent, to show that the treating provider's intent and their reasoning under the medical decision making as to why the tests were needed and how that will impact the treatment of the patient moving forward. So the ADR will list out the types of documents that they're asking for, but also keep an open mind and understand that you're going to need to ensure that all of the notes pulled fully support the service and medical necessity. People always stop at just the service itself and have a little bit of tunnel vision instead of understanding what they're looking for to be able to support it. And, it's kind of like you can only make a first impression first. It's really tough sometimes because I know we're told to not give anything extra unless they ask for it. Well, that may be true in maybe, hate to put it this way, in a criminal trial, but before we get there, right now they're just saying support what you did, not just the code itself, but support the medical necessity of the claim. So the claim form or billed information along with all the supporting documentation, so it needs to be organized for submission so that they can see how you got to your decision to either order those tests, perform that service, and where you're going from there. How is it going to benefit the patient? So prior to sending to the payer, make sure that either a compliance consultant or your internal employee has the medical coding and auditing training and is reviewing all the pulled data to ensure nothing was missed and that it's appropriate. One thing that the ADRs do, I've noticed, is it also brings to light maybe some workflow issues, some documentation issues, and just some laziness sometimes in showing that medical necessity and I hate to use until you get caught, until you get requested for information. So the ADR will provide you instructions how to submit it as well. Where do you submit it? And again, the date. If there are errors found in the documentation that's being pulled, you need to make sure you're reviewing it with your physician, with your providers, and with if you have hired any kind of outside consultant, make sure that they understand, this is what we have, this is what they're asking, what do we do now? And you want to also make sure that you're not changing anything once it's billed. They know what's going on. There's a reason that you've been targeted or had this request. Do never ever erase, change, delete, or alter a record once you've already billed it. So the next steps related to the claim may be correcting it, could be self-reporting, but you want to be honest with what you are submitting. And, these types of special investigations are not just random routine audits. And I just mentioned a couple that could be coming up. There is a reason your claims have been selected, and you and your team need to work collectively to address all components throughout the audit process. And you don't want to wait until that you're involved in an escalated review. So to seek out help. But if you're going to go the attorney route, the healthcare attorney route, if you're getting these, I would probably wait till you complete a request, see what the outcome is, see how you did. And then at that point, if you think that, you could have more coming through, then you may want to definitely engage in that direction, or at least an external consultant who knows what they're talking about, because you really have to be on top of this, especially now. And I'll just put it out there. Am I happy with our new HHS secretary? And then as of this podcast, I just saw this morning that Hamet Oz, he did get confirmed for Medicare as the administrator, Dr. Oz. So they're both very litigious. And I don't want to say that in a bad way. They want transparency. They don't want people doing things they're not supposed to do. And sometimes the only way to get people's attention is to sue them. And so that's a big deal as well. So we just want to make sure that you're not in that area where it's escalated to that point. Hopefully some of your inquiries, the worst it's coming from is an SIU. It's not coming from a RAC, or it's not coming from a UPIC, or it's just coming from a payer that says, hey, we're just taking a look. Or maybe the code was, for example, I saw a claim recently where that was denied from one of my Coding Corner clients, and they said, we don't know why this is denied. So I said, well, send me the report. That's why you have the membership. And I took a look at that versus the EOB versus the claim, and it was a cardiology claim, and they had billed one code 92941 for an acute MI intervention, and then for a heart cath, and then for moderate sedation. Well, as I'm looking at it, the diagnosis that was used was unspecified when it was clear it was the inferior lateral wall. So they had a specific diagnosis but didn't use it. They used unspecified. If you've got a patient that's having a heart attack, I would think you would know which area or which chamber of the heart is a problem. They missed another angioplasty in a different artery, and they also billed the wrong kind of heart cath. So, I captured 4 codes. They captured 3, and 1 was incorrect, and the diagnoses were incorrect. So this is where you have to send a corrected claim. You have to make sure that you're scrubbing your claims before they go out, that somebody's looking at that and coding it correctly. And sometimes their inquiries are accurate. Their denials are accurate. And I know it's better to be proactive to get these things handled before they go out, but this is just to let you know that if you get these ADRs, so again, that's an additional documentation request, you need to pay attention to it, and you should have somebody who's opening the mail that isn't just there to open and find checks. They're there to understand that there are documentation requests that come in, and you should have a process in place to make sure it's reviewed, that you know what kind of request it is and who it needs to go to immediately to be handled. In your workflow, it should be on a log. You should put the date that it's due, and there should be somebody following up on that within a week from the due date to make sure that it's not just sitting on somebody's desk and that it has been followed up on. Okay, I hope that was helpful today. Again, thank you to Stephanie for her article to start me off on this, and then just adding my 2 cents on there. But I hope that everyone has a good rest of your week. We are heating up to over 90 degrees here in Southern California this week, so you can know I'm going to be in the pool getting my tan. And I like getting my tan. That is always a goal for me. But everyone, make it a great day, and thank you for listening to the Codecast podcast.
For more information on medical coding, billing, auditing, and compliance, including how to hire Terry, follow Terry on Twitter at TerryCoder1, or visit her website at www.terryfletcher.net. Podcast producer Joe Kuzma. Music producer Dassassin Music.